The house had belonged to Elias Thorne's great-aunt, a strange, taciturn woman who died alone. Elias inherited it sight unseen, a crumbling two-story Victorian nestled deep in the Maine woods, 20 miles from the nearest town. He needed to clear it out for sale, a simple task he figured would take a long weekend. When he arrived in late October, the air was already thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The house was cold and heavy with silence. Elias noticed immediately that all the windows were shut tight, not just closed, but nailed from the inside. The interior was a time capsule of eccentricity, faded velvet furniture, taxidermied birds with cloudy eyes, and stacks of notebooks filled with spidery, incomprehensible handwriting. The house gave him an immediate, visceral sense of wrongness. Elias focused on the attic first. While prying open a steamer trunk, he found a small, leather-bound diary, likely belonging to his great-aunt Millicent. The entries were sparse until a few years before her death, when they took a sudden, obsessive turn. The late entries focused entirely on a single topic: the well. March 14th. The sound has changed. It is not the sound of water or rock now. It is hollow. It is expecting. April 2nd. I plugged the eaves and nailed the windows. I must not hear it. If I hear it, I will look. April 19th. The sound comes from the bedrock. It is a slow, rhythmic thump, like a massive, tired heart. It is getting closer to the surface. Elias shrugged it off as the ramblings of a lonely old woman, likely disturbed by something mundane like a faulty septic pump. That night, Elias was jolted awake by a sound so low it vibrated in his teeth. It wasn't a thump. It was a guttural sucking noise, wet and deep, coming from outside. He jumped out of the brittle antique bed and went to the nearest window. He peeled back a sliver of the dusty lace curtain and peered out into the moonless night. The sound continued, slow and patient. Swoosh gasp, swoosh gasp. Elias realized the sound was coming from the backyard, exactly where he remembered seeing a dilapidated old stone well, capped with a heavy, rusted iron lid. Fear, cold and chemical, flooded his system. He remembered Millicent's frantic entry. If I hear it, I will look. He grabbed a flashlight and forced himself out of the front door. The air outside was colder than the house, tasting faintly of ozone. He skirted around the side of the house, shining the beam towards the well. The well was dark stone, but the iron cap was missing. He approached cautiously. The sucking sound intensified, the air around the well shaft seeming to pull inward. Elias held his breath and shone his light down the opening. The stone shaft plunged into absolute darkness. But the light beam didn't just stop. It was eaten. It seemed to illuminate nothing, only demonstrating the absence of light itself. And then he heard the voice. It was not a roar or a scream, but a dry, rattling whisper that seemed to speak inside the hollow of his skull. You have heard the well? Now the well hears you. Elias stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight. The light beam spun wildly before the glass shattered on a rock, plunging the yard back into darkness. He scrambled back inside, heart hammering against his ribs. He locked the front door and leaned against it, shaking. He was being ridiculous, imagining things in an old house. It was the wind, or a fissure in the earth, or just Millicent's diary working on his imagination. He stayed awake the rest of the night, huddled in a chair. When the gray dawn finally crept through the gaps in the boarded-up windows, the sucking sound had stopped. The house seemed merely old again, not malevolent. Elias decided he was done. He would call a contractor, sell the property as is, and deal with the financial loss. He gathered his meager luggage, ready to walk away. But as he walked through the living room, he stopped. On the dusty mantelpiece, next to a chipped porcelain doll, was the iron cap of the well. It was massive, rusted, and covered in grit. He hadn't seen it there yesterday. He looked closer at the diary, which was lying open on the floor where he'd dropped it. The last entry was brief. October 30th, it spoke. I put the lid back. It is heavy. I cannot hold it for long. Millicent had died in late October. Elias was here on October 31st. He picked up the journal, flipping back to an earlier, less frantic entry. July 12th. The water here is not for drinking. The well is not for drawing. It is an aventured for things that should stay buried. Elias's blood ran cold. The well cap was still in the house, yet the sucking sound had stopped when the sun rose. Had Millicent been keeping something trapped inside? And was it now loose or merely waiting? He drove his rental car out of the driveway, never looking back. 2 weeks later, back in the city, he tried to forget the house. He had listed it for sale with an immediate caveat. Do not drink the water and do not remove the lid from the well. The real estate agent called him excitedly. A buyer, a strange middle-aged man who insisted on paying cash and waived the inspection, had snapped up the property immediately. He sounded very focused on the well, actually, the agent chirped. He asked if the old lid was still on it. I told him we had no idea. Elias felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. Did you tell him about the warning? Elias asked, his voice strained. The warning about the water? Of course, but the truth is, the buyer, he just kept talking about this sound. He said he was looking for a very particular kind of sound, a deep, low thrumming that he heard years ago. Elias hung up the phone slowly. He knew that sound. It was the sound of a massive, tired heart. The man had not purchased the property despite the well. He had purchased it for the well, and Elias had just sold him the key to whatever Millicent had desperately tried to keep buried. That night, Elias could not sleep. He swore he heard it again, not through the earth or the floorboards, but through the city air conditioning vent, a slow, rhythmic thump growing louder, closer, like a new, powerful heart being slowly brought back to life. And he realized the horrible truth. He hadn't escaped the house. He had simply been replaced. The well had found a new, closer ear to listen to.